Hey everyone, welcome back to this week's PC Gaming News. In today's episode, we'll be covering the fairly disastrous release of Mortal Online 2. By all accounts, the game itself is pretty cool, but the launch has been mired with issues. Also, after almost 20 years, World of Warcraft will be getting some cross-faction group content. This might be related to its dwindling player count, who knows? And I want to talk about Sony buying Bungie, what that means for Destiny, as well as the studio's other upcoming games. In addition to this, we cover a few things like Sony's further push into PC gaming, the upcoming Guild Wars 2 expansion, an update for Valheim, along with some other stuff. And with that, let's go ahead and jump into this week's PC gaming news. Now, by its very nature, Mortal Online 2 looked to be a game that probably wouldn't break through into mainstream success. It is, after all, a hardcore PvP-focused single-server MMO that in a lot of ways looks quite brutal. So I kind of expected that it would have a fairly niche and relatively small following, but it could still do well since it did seem to have some pretty neat features. Well, it turns out that quite a few people are interested in the game, but unfortunately, most of them have been unable to really play. Because Mortal Online 2 runs on a single server, it can only support so many people logged in at any given time, and that number is evidently way smaller than the number of people looking to play. This has resulted in a vast majority of people being unable to even log in, stuck into queue times for hours and hours at a time. Then, those who are able to get in are likely at the beginning to be stuck in the starting area, as the game's main open zone has a player capacity that is at its limit most of the time. This made worse by the fact that players who are actually able to get into that main area will just sit idly in town so as not to lose their spot. Also, because the game runs on one server located in Europe, anyone who eventually got through the queue, left the starter area, and was able to begin playing the real bulk of the game, but was playing from outside of Europe, well, they would have to contend with an less than ideal ping and lag issues. All of this has resulted in what is currently a mixed rating for the game on Steam, with players demanding refunds and steering others away from the game. In spite of all of this though, the game has still apparently sold over 100,000 copies as of this recording, which I think just points to what is probably the biggest disappointment around all of this. By all accounts, this is a pretty cool and unique MMO experience, and a lot of people are interested in playing this game. I've got friends who speak very highly of what Mortal Online 2 has to offer if it was just working properly and not full of lag and never-ending queues and could actually be played as it is intended. So hopefully Star Vault can sort things out in the coming months here. This will be another one of those games that I'll just hold off on and try it later down the road. We do have a busy next few weeks as it is, so it's not like I'm gonna waste my time sitting in queue for a game all day long. But yeah, I guess best of luck to Mortal Online 2. There's a big change coming to World of Warcraft in the not too distant future, and that is the addition of cross-faction dungeons, raids, and raided PvP. For nearly all of the game's history, doing any of these activities required that you group up and play with members of your own faction. However, once this update rolls out, members of the Alliance and Horde will now be able to play together. Of this change, WoW's game director said, "We've been revisiting things we've said no to that people in the community have asked for, and one of them has been the desire for cross-faction play. We frankly probably reached that tipping point a little while ago, but in a game like this, we're stubborn and traditionalist, and it's scary to say, let's uproot this foundational pillar of what the game has been for over a decade, but it's time." Now, I don't doubt their reasoning here, but also, this is almost certainly in no small part due to what is most likely a declining player base for WoW. We did recently learn that Blizzard lost another 2 million MAU, or monthly active users, from Q3 to Q4 of last year. This continuing the downward trend that the company has been seeing in recent years. In 2018, Blizzard was at around 38 million monthly active users. In 2019, that dropped down to 32 million. In 2020, down to 29 million. And now, as of Q4 2021, it's at 24 million, almost half of where it was just 4 years ago. Of course, it's important to keep in mind that this is across all of Blizzard games, but I also think we can safely assume it is at least somewhat representative of the health of WoW's player base as well. Now, moves like adding a cross-faction group content. That does support the idea that the overall player base is probably declining, and so this just gives people a larger pool of teammates to queue up with when it comes to doing group content. And I promise I'm not here just to dump on WoW. I have, and in a lot of ways still do, love the game. It's been a big part of my life ever since it released in 2004, and I almost certainly will be revisiting again at some point in the future. But that said, there is no denying that the game and Blizzard itself has lost some of its shimmer, and most certainly its player base. Another week goes by, another acquisition takes place. Sony has recently announced its plans to purchase Destiny developer Bungie for $3.6 billion. Of the deal, they say that Bungie will operate as an independent subsidiary of Sony Interactive Entertainment while keeping the existing team working on its games intact. In fact, it turns out that a whopping $1.2 billion of that purchase price was spent just to ensure that very thing. To quote Sony here, approximately 1/3 of the $3.6 billion acquisition consideration consists primarily of deferred payments to employee shareholders conditional upon their continued employment and other retention incentives. These amounts will be paid over the course of several years after the closing date. So basically, they just want to keep the people around that have made Bungie what it is today, with the hope that Destiny and its future games are successful. And yes, you heard that correctly, there's more going on at Bungie than just their work on Destiny 2. Some time ago, we learned that the studio had another game in development. Although details are sparse, we know that they're working with NetEase on a game unrelated to their flagship IP. In terms of what the Sony acquisition means for Bungie's existing games, the company has implied they have no intention of removing Destiny from other platforms. Instead, they're looking to support their future growth, and of course, in turn, will profit by getting a major cut of whatever those games earn going forward. This is yet another twist in Bungie's crazy history as a studio. They started out many years ago independent, and then they were bought by Microsoft to make and release the original Halo on Xbox. After a few more games, they broke free to go independent again, during which time they began their work on the original Destiny, and then as part of this 10-year deal to release and support the Destiny franchise, they were purchased by Activision. However, before completing those 10 years, they bought themselves back, retaining the rights to Destiny, going independent once again, and now they are being purchased by Sony and will be under their wing for the foreseeable future. I don't know, we'll see what comes of all of this. I don't really know what it means for the future of Destiny in particular, or whatever else they've got in the pipeline. Like I said, it does seem as if Sony doesn't plan to make their games PlayStation exclusives, but who knows? This could change, especially if Microsoft begins making Bethesda, Activision, or Blizzard games exclusive to the Xbox and PC. Maybe Sony will then hit back and do the same for Bungie. Probably not for Destiny 2, because that game is already so entrenched on so many platforms, but for Bungie's future games, I think it's certainly possible. Speaking of which, I do have some good news if you are one of the many gamers hoping for Sony to release more of their PlayStation exclusives onto PC. It seems that that future is inevitable. Apparently, the recent PC release of God of War was the company's most successful title on the platform ever. This according to a few metrics. For one, it was the first PlayStation release to be the #1 selling Steam game 3 weeks in a row, and also it reached the highest concurrent peak player count of any Sony game on PC. At the moment, God of War's PC version is expected to surpass Horizon Zero Dawn's 250% return on investment, which, as you can imagine, is likely to motivate Sony quite a bit, and apparently it will. In laying out their plans for future first-party software growth, Sony said that they intend to launch 10 live service games by March 2026 and grow their games and franchises beyond just PlayStation consoles, referencing at that point the recent success of God of War on PC. While I don't know if this means we can expect day and date release parity on the PC for first-party Sony games, it's probably likely that they'll still have that exclusive to Sony consoles and then later come out with PC ports. It does clearly indicate that we could expect more of those ports though, like Bloodborne, Ghost of Tsushima, Spider-Man, Ratchet & Clank, Returnal. All of these games seem like good contenders for things that could come on over and be fairly successful on the PC. And of course, as pretty much exclusively a PC gamer nowadays, I wholeheartedly welcome this move. It's been a little over a year now since the early access release of Valheim, and in celebration celebration of this anniversary, developer Iron Gate laid out some of the future plans and what they've been working on. Currently, they are putting the finishing touches on the mountain update, in which they'll be adding a new cave system along with a few other things to that region. And then beyond that, they have been ramping up work on the Mistlands. This will be the next major biome coming to Valheim. They said that they have nailed down the core concepts and are just working on what kind of inhabitants, build pieces, enemies, and mechanics this region will include. With this, they shared a bit of concept art for one such creature. This looks kind of like a moth, I'm guessing. They also mentioned that the game is set to launch on Steam Deck this month, so they've been busy with that. And then that was pretty much it. Frankly, it was not as substantial of an update as some may hope for, and this has actually been a major point of criticism around Valheim, just how slow updates have been for the early access version of the game. Like I said, it's been a year since it released into early access, and so far the biggest content update the game has gotten was the Hearth and Home patch, which added a few changes to the food and stat system, shields and blocking, some weapon tweaks, and really that was about all. They added like a new enemy type to the swamp region, but pretty small stuff, like all things considered. I myself am a massive Valheim fan. It was easily one of, if not my favorite game of 2021. I put in nearly 100 hours and I loved pretty much every second. The best $20 I spent last year, that's for sure. Now, as much as I did love the game, when I saw the Hearth and Home update changes, it was not nearly enough to entice me to revisit it. There's just been some concern from people, I feel like, around this like fairly glacial speed of the game getting content updates. As far as I've seen, they've been mostly focused on things like the game's stability, balance, and then improving what's already there, rather than adding new stuff. But yeah, it's been a full year since the game released, so I really hope that they focus on more content coming to the game in 2022, just for its long-term success. Now, of course, it's worth keeping in mind that this is being developed by a fairly small indie team of around 10 people, I believe. So that no doubt plays a major role in the speed in which they can add new content. And this was a massive like indie success story. They've said so themselves that they were never expecting it to be nearly as successful and popular as it was. And while I appreciate that they may want to keep a small team and their same development pace and quality of life as when they started and first released the game, I also understand fans' desire for the game to get more frequent and more substantial content updates, early access or not. And I don't know, I guess we'll see what the year 2022 holds for Valheim. At last, we have a release date for Guild Wars 2 End of Dragons. It'll be launching on the very last day of the month, Monday, February the 28th. In addition to announcing the release date, they've also given us a look at the new major city. Like the rest of the expansion, it features Eastern-inspired architecture with a futuristic bent powered by its inhabitants' use of Jade technology. As a reminder, End of Dragons will be taking us to the mystical lands of Cantha. It adds new features like fishing, boats, a co-op siege turtle mount, new elite specializations for every class, and access to the Jade bot mastery track. So there you have it. We finally have a release date. We will be playing End of Dragons as of February 28th. Can I just say though, man, this like Elden Ring launches just a few days before this. I just want to tell them it's okay if you don't hit February. Like, give it a couple weeks, launch End of Dragons in March, it would be totally fine. I mean, it doesn't really matter. I know either way I'll be playing both games in addition to Lost Ark, and if I have time, I'd love to squeeze in Dying Light 2. We'll see, but yes, end of the day, I'm very excited for End of Dragons. I will be playing it, and I look forward to it. We got some interesting news this week about Blizzard's upcoming survival game, mainly the fact that it's been in development for quite a long time. According to the LinkedIn account of the game's project lead, Craig Amai, he has been in that position for about 4.5 years now. Now, on top of that, Blizzard's current president, Mike Ibarra, has stated that he's already played the game for many hours himself and that he's incredibly excited about the team's vision and what they've been creating. Now, admittedly, none of this really tells us much of anything. A game could be in the planning and design phase for 4.5 years after all, although clearly they have put something together if it is playable, but playable can also mean a whole lot of things. Like, it could be controlling a character in a textureless world with barely any animations or art, or it could be fairly fleshed out and just a couple of years away from launch. We simply have no real way of knowing. Now, I would like to say hey, prior Blizzard titles have had a development time of in the ballpark of 5 to 7 years. So if this new survival game has really been in development for almost 5 years, we could be seeing it pretty soon, right? But these past few years haven't exactly been smooth, and development of anything at the company was almost certainly impacted for a variety of reasons. So this story is to mostly just say something is happening, and this new survival game could possibly be further along than we expect, or it could not. I don't know. We don't really know. I just thought it was interesting. Sword of Legends Online, one of the handful of MMOs released in 2021, has revealed plans to go free to play. In its announcement, the game's publisher Gameforge said, "Over the past few months, player population growth has become a concern for our community, and we have listened." They then go on to say that they will be removing the paywall to allow more players to enjoy solo and the vast amounts of content currently available, as well as what's coming and planned for 2022 and beyond. They then followed up by promising that all in-game purchases will remain cosmetic and that there will not be any pay-to-win elements. And I guess I'll be curious to see how much of a difference going free-to-play makes. You know, the game did have a peak of around 18,000 players at launch. However, it's been hovering around 600 concurrent players for these past few months, which I think points to what's likely a much larger issue with the game than the fact that it has a paywall. That said, going free-to-play will almost certainly bring in some new players, and then it'll just be a matter of how long they end up sticking around. The VR MMO Zenith: The Last City has been off to a pretty good start. The game launched into Steam's early access on January 27th, and aside from some bugs and a few server issues, it's been doing fairly well. It is currently sitting in a very positive rating with just over 2,000 user reviews. At one point, it was in the top 10 Steam top sellers list. The daily concurrent count is hovering around 1,000 players, and at launch, it peaked at 4,000, which is way more than I expected for a VR-only Steam MMO release. They've already also revealed some upcoming plans and updates for the game. There's a quality of life patch releasing soon that will be adding some in-game alerts, new quests, improved animations, and improvements to the game's UI. And then for 2022, their content roadmap includes the addition of a third playable class, player housing, new crafting and life skill options, and more end-game content. I gotta say, I'm pretty happy to hear that this game is doing as well as it is. I'll say it again, I think this looks great, and I'm pretty jealous of anyone who can play this and not get sick. Stupid VR motion nausea sickness that I get. And I know some of you mentioned when I brought this up in the past that I should try like eating a banana or opening up the windows or turning on a fan or even downing some Dramamine. Yeah, I don't know, dude. Like, this game looks neat, but I'm not sure it looks chugging medication neat, so I might have to give it a pass. We got a couple of new game announcements this week. First, we learned about this new development studio named Gardens. They consist of members who have previously worked on titles such as Monster Hunter, Fallout, Journey, and Skyrim, to name a few. The studio revealed that their very first game is going to be a multiplayer fantasy title that is, quote, inspired by some of our favorite memories playing online games, particularly moments shared with strangers. They added that players will find themselves crossing paths in a shape-shifting, unpredictable wilderness filled with mystery and magic, featuring a timeless visual direction and tactile multiplayer play. We don't have a name for the game yet or many more details beyond that. They also revealed some concept art, but that's about it. I'll just be keeping my eye on this one as more information is revealed. And then also, Rockstar announced that they're making Grand Theft Auto 6, so that's a thing. In terms of new games playable right now, of course, we just recently had the release of Dying Light 2. The reviews are a bit all over the place. It seems like this game is pretty decent, not perfect, certainly having some issues, performance being one of the biggest gripes that people have, and then just some mechanical issues with the game. But by and large, it's done very well, and it seems like if you liked the first Dying Light, while things are a little bit different, you will probably also like Dying Light 2. And then I want to bring up the fact that Path of Exile just had an expansion, the Siege of Atlas. It's apparently doing very well, making Path of Exile reach the highest peak player count that it's seen in its 10-year history. And then coming up very, very soon, we have, of course, got the release of Lost Ark. I've talked about this game a ton. I'm very much so looking forward to it. So it's officially releasing on February 11th. However, if you pre-order those like founders packs or whatever, there is a 3-day head start on Tuesday the 8th. I really don't, I just don't love these pre-order early access things, especially for games that are like progression based like this, where the daily content matters into your player power. Add on top of the fact that this game has the ability to purchase player power to accelerate. I don't know, it's it's whatever. It is what it is. The game is really cool, especially being free to play. I've already sunk, at this point, it's like 120, 130 hours, and I just can't wait to play the launch version. It's a fun game. It is free to play. Just try not to get wrapped up in the desire to stay at the tip of the top of player progression. If you do, you're gonna have to play every single day, most likely, or spend some money. But if you can play this game and enjoy it casually, it's like a really fun top-down action game with a ton of MMO stuff. I just really like it. And then also releasing this week is Sifu, the like martial arts action combat game. Reviews are already out. Seems pretty positive. The biggest complaint people seem to have is the game's difficulty. Also keep in mind, this isn't a super lengthy game. Looks like estimates are between 10 and 15 hours, but for the price and just the uniqueness of it, I think this is a pretty neat looking title as well. And with that, we wrap up this episode of this week's PC Gaming News. Thank you guys as always for watching. Hope you enjoy it, and I'll see you next week, all right? Take it easy.